Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me make sure I am up. And I'm seeing green on this end. Let me check my sound one more time, make sure it didn't dip. I'm paranoid. My wife got me a mic for Christmas. Like a studio mic. The ones that come down on the end of the arm and everything else. I will probably set that up today. So an awesome article was written in Anti-Media. This is by Darius, oh Jesus Christ, these names. Shahamabisi. Dude, I am immensely sorry for screwing that up. I know I didn't get that name right. I love this article because this article, it's called Pakistan Says the United States is no longer its ally. And it's a much bigger deal than you think. A lot of people don't talk about this. Like, so you rarely see stuff like this in mainstream media, which is why I love this article. There was a doddering old man, a senile old man, who said something that was immensely true and will probably be true to the end of time. A man has to know his limitations. Now, it's true that you can shoot back and say, well, wait a minute, Clint Eastwood was standing there talking to a chair, an empty chair, for 15 minutes. Fair enough. But at the very least, that particular statement was said in his younger, stronger days, and that particular statement was absolutely and perfectly true. A man has to know his limitations. Now, that's not just for men, that's for pretty much anything. If you stress the limitations or the limits of any particular thing, that thing is sowing the seeds of his own demise. And you can make an argument, and I would make this argument, that anything in existence, to create anything that propagates itself, meaning that it's not just a fixed thing. Anything that propagates itself has forces that are driving that particular thing. If those forces cannot reach a level of equilibrium, the seeds of its own destruction will be sowed in the way that thing is. And that's not just for physical systems, that's for human beings also. That's for human systems also. Meaning governments, meaning companies. If you are exceeding the limits of your skill and ability, you're going to fail. Now, I make this point, and I stress this point, because it also applies to countries. It also applies to countries. The United States, after World War II, when all of Europe, for the most part, was decimated and destroyed, let me say it this way. Towards the end of that war, the United States put two massive size, pretty much armadas, military or units, on both sides of the globe. Like, that's the level of power that the United States, or military power that the United States was expressing at the end of that war. We weren't damaged in this war. Europe was decimated. And our factories were converted, you know, all these auto factories and everything else, those things were converted into put out weapons. A lot of weapons. Planes, bullets, guns, all this stuff. Essentially a military industrial complex starting off, or you can say the beginning of the military industrial complex. With everybody else being decimated, the United States had one foe in this, one other superpower in this. Soviet Union. Now, this is somewhat amazing, to be honest. I mean, and people don't give the Soviet Union credit for this. The Soviet Union had been invaded in regards to, after World War I, at the point where they had the revolution. They were invaded by 6 other nations, meaning the Western powers, trying to put the capitalist system back into place. They failed in that endeavor. So after a revolution, after that revolution, where you had all of these people dying under Lenin and Trotsky and all this other stuff, then you end up with Stalin. Well, Stalin murdered many of his generals before World War II. They lost, what, 10 million people in World War I. I think it was like 30 or 40 million people in World War II. Revolution, and yet, with all of this turmoil, all of this catastrophe, the Soviet Union was still able to pull themselves up to be the #2 superpower. That is an amazing feat in and of itself. The Soviet Union at some point went bust. So fast forward to what, the 80s. Soviet Union goes bust. Now, the Soviet Union going bust, I would make an argument that it was state capitalism. It wasn't this thing of communism. But regardless, whatever, they went bust. Meaning the United States was a unipolar power, or this world was a unipolar world. We won. At least that's what the people thought. We won. Now this is somewhat of a cartoonish perspective of things in regards to the way the United States was looking at this. This wasn't a game of chess. Meaning it wasn't you had your opponent with a finite space. There's 64 squares, the space itself is constrained. That's not really the case. It is a fluid position in which people are jockeying for power. And in this particular point, the United States had power. It was the solo power. But it's not a game that you can win, if that makes sense. Like, this is not this game of chess where you play and then one side ends and one person just wins. You're in a game space where you have multiple people competing in multiple things that are moving. And yes, at this particular moment, you might have been dominant. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stay that way forever. There are other powers, and those powers can combine their forces. You have other powers that may rise. All of those things. There's no such thing as just outright winning the game. The game is always in a fluid state. Pretending as if you won the game because you're a unipolar power exceeded your limitations. Let's say it that way. Meaning this belief that you can do pretty much anything you want because you're the sole superpower and everybody can shut the fuck up. And if it's like America, fuck yeah. America, fuck yeah. All you other sniveling bitches lost, so all of you sniveling bitches need to fall in line. If you tell you to do something, if we do something, you would say yes sir or yes ma'am, and you would leave us to our devices. We are the United States. That was the policy. And this is the policy that the United States enacted one way after the next. Now, whether you want to talk about invading Iraq and killing 1 million people, would the United States have invaded Iraq and killed those people if there was another power in place that was somewhat of a bulwark jockeying with this idea of creating some kind of proxy war in that territory? I don't know, but we would never know. At the end of the day, the United States, unipolar world, there's nobody else against us. We're going to invade this country because this country can do nothing about it. They don't have nuclear weapons. They can't do anything about it. Now, fast forward to today. The United States has terrified the rest of the world in our behavior, not just with Donald Trump, but with the last presidents also. If you ask people around the world who is the biggest threat to world security, that will be us. That will be us. We spend $1 trillion a year on the military. These guys are maniacs. And part of the reason that they're maniacs is, again, because they took this belief that we are the only superpower. We can do whatever we want. Every other sniveling bitch need to fall in line. And to some degree, the problem is the other nations accepted that. They accepted it. But, like everything else, that acceptance only comes at a certain point. Meaning, you can push that, but so far, in which case the other nations will realize, oh yeah, if we work together, this unipolar thing kind of goes away. Meaning, subverting the dollar will be one way. Meaning, other countries are trying to find ways to get around using the dollar. And some of these countries have found ways to get around using the dollar, including China. Or this thing in the UN, where the United States decides, hey, we're going to move our embassy to Jerusalem, and we expect all of you other nations to fall in line and tell us how awesome we are for doing it. And the other nations said no. Leading the president to throw a hissy fit, and Nikki Haley to be hysterical in the United Nations. We're being isolated. We're being isolated because of our behavior. We're being isolated because we're doing things around the world that we have no business doing. We're antagonizing one country after the next, screaming about the Russian stuff, screaming about China, screaming about Iran, screaming about Pakistan. It's like, shit, man. This country invaded a country and killed 1 million people. We've destabilized the entirety of the Middle East. Part of elements in our government made the decision to attack one nation after the next, ending with Iran. Literally saying this openly. Saying this openly. It is on the books at this point that we're going through one nation after the next in the Middle East to destabilize that region. And beyond that, we're supporting 2 terrorist states. One Israel, who runs to the United States when it's looking for his big brother after it attacks other nations. It's like, aha, you can't attack us because we have a big brother giving us billions of dollars and we have nuclear weapons. You can't attack us. You can't touch us. We can military strike you all you want. All we want. But you can't attack us. We have a big brother. Essentially protecting a state that has an open-air ghetto, a literal open-air ghetto, killing thousands of people periodically, mowing the lawn as they call it, murdering kids, and putting children in prison. That's one nation. That's one ally that we have. The other one, Saudi Arabia, is an outright terrorist state that passes terrorism throughout that particular region of the world. Don't take my opinion on it. Take Hillary Clinton's opinion on it in WikiLeaks, where she said the exact same thing. Mind you, it didn't stop her from taking money from these people. Didn't stop her from taking money at all. I'm making the point that who we associate with. Have you ever heard the saying, your moms are like, your mom kind of make the point of the friends you keep for the most part of the people who you mostly resemble? What does it mean that we have friends like these? That these are the people who we ally and associate ourselves with? Recently, another headline came up in anti-media. Pakistan says the United States is no longer its ally and it's a much bigger deal than you think. Written by Darius Shatamabisi. And this is somewhat of a big deal. Pakistan, aside from allowing us in their airspace, if you remember, Pakistan allowed us to murder bin Laden. Yes, Pakistan allowed us to murder bin Laden. I don't give a shit the story that they put out. Seymour Hersh came out with the real account of this. Seymour Hersh asked the question of, well, wait a minute, how on earth were they going to get a military helicopter into that place? That thing blows up. They're near a military academy, but nobody comes. Like, it would be like something happening at West Point, nobody figuring out that something happened at West Point. It's somewhat of an insane perspective on these things. Seymour Hersh made this point that, sorry, I'm bad at doing two things at once. Seymour Hersh made this point that, Jesus Christ, yeah. Seymour Hersh made this point that somebody walked into headquarters and essentially said, we know where bin Laden is. And the people completely disbelieved him. It was like, this guy's full of shit. This guy doesn't know where bin Laden is. And he makes the point and tells them, look, Pakistan has been holding bin Laden. Pakistan has been holding bin Laden. Now, these guys don't believe him right off the bat because the United States supposedly has a relationship with Pakistan. And the United States, somebody in our government, contacts the Pakistani government. And lo and behold, it's true. They admit it. Yes, okay, you got us. We got him. We're holding them. The United States essentially demanded access to bin Laden. We would like to kill him. We want to shoot him in the face. Pakistan gives them the go-ahead with one exception. You can't tell that you did it. You can't tell people that we let you do it. People will flip the fuck out. You can't tell people that you did it. And the United States said, okay, we won't tell. They did an air raid. One helicopter goes down. They blow that helicopter up. They have enough time to bring in another helicopter. They go in, put their people in, shoot bin Laden in the face. They don't even try to bring him back. Don't even try. It's like the big bad United States is not brave enough to bring back the person who they're accusing of a terrorist assault. So whatever. They canoe the guy. They essentially shoot him in the head in a way that makes his skull crack open. And get the body, throws it overboard, and all this other stuff. Pakistan knew. Pakistan allowed it. Obama came out and said, we got him. He gave his we got him speech. Now, the problem with this is, Pakistan told them, shut the fuck up about this. This will cause internal issues in our country. Shut up about this. You're not supposed to tell. And yet, the United States told. And not just told. If you remember when they told that, they had multiple stories. It was like 4 or 5 different stories. Oh, the guy threw his wife in the way. I mean, he was hiding behind some woman. I mean, all sorts of stuff. It's like, it became a point where people were like, well, wait a minute. You've changed the story 3 or 4 times. What the fuck's going on? Well, they changed the story 3 or 4 times because the story wasn't true. The story wasn't true. It wasn't this awesome intelligence. It wasn't people being tortured in order to get information. None of that was true. Your government, once again, lied to you. The government once again lied to you. My point in this, Pakistan is not just an ally. Pakistan is a nuclear-powered nation. It is problematic to fuck around with Pakistan in this way. And Donald Trump antagonizing these guys will cause political issues in this region of the world, particularly if we want to continue to have access to Pakistan. Meaning, Pakistan takes a lot of shit from their association with us. And the idea that we're popping off at either of these countries is amazing. He's undermining Iran, and in the undermining of one country, of course, that country is going to try to find allies to ally with. Well, you have Russia, you have Iran, you have China, you have Pakistan, and you've created a situation where these countries start to intermingle and work closer together. Meaning you have somewhat of an axis. Not axis, well, nothing insane or crazy like that. I'm just saying you're creating blocks of countries that are antagonistic towards you because of your tenor towards them. That's my point. Add in Syria to this. Add in potentially North Korea, even though North Korea is kind of batshit crazy and it's kind of his own thing. You're creating enemies, that's my point. And you're not creating singular enemies like attacking Iraq or attacking one like Iran. You're creating blocks of enemies. We're being isolated as a rogue nation. And mind you, this is Europe also, by the way. I mean, at the point where you have the United States being completely isolated in regards to this decision to move the embassy over to Jerusalem, when you have people in Europe who are banning Trump from even coming to the country or coming to parts of the country, which is what they did in the UK. Certain areas were banning this idea of Trump coming to the UK. He becomes toxic to Theresa May. So even though Theresa May desperately needs a trade deal, sucking up to Trump is not a way for her to get it. Even though when it started off, it looks like she was going to try to do what she could to schmooze with Trump in order to get some kind of trade deal with Trump. He's so gross. Like it's hard to get this across. He is repugnant to any other country. No other nation is going to want to interact with this guy in this way. I know China does this. China has a particular relationship with the United States. But if anything goes on, meaning if there's any conflict with Russia, China's going to be with him. You've created blocks of enemies. That's my point. Particularly when you're talking about Pakistan. Donald Trump's decision to ring in the new year by simultaneously demonizing both Iran and Pakistan on Twitter has already backfired tremendously. Following threats that the United States will withhold aid to Pakistan, the United States confirmed it will withhold $255 million in aid, which has now become $900 million, and is now reportedly threatening to roughly $2 billion more as well. You know what doesn't full on work? Essentially getting across that you've just bribed this other country into obedience. Now, I've always assumed that the money that the United States gives out in this way was purely done for political reasons. The United States doesn't care about the welfare of people in other countries. Ultimately, that money is somewhat of a bribe. I'm giving you this much money, and I can take this much money away if you do something that is against our interests. And in this case, Donald Trump has pulled that card. I'm going to take money from you when you don't fall in line. Think about this. You're essentially trying to say you've just bribed a nation and that you're trying to use the money to get across that bribe and making that bribe overt. I am going to punish you by taking money away from you if you don't do X. He did the same thing to the United Nations, by the way. Essentially saying, I am going to pull money out of the United Nations because the United Nations didn't follow or didn't agree with us on Jerusalem. Let's keep going. The problem with this is the moment that you pull that card and the moment that you try to get across to these countries that they're just bought client states, you have a problem. It works as long as it's unacknowledged, if that makes sense. Like you have a certain amount of influence and a certain amount of sway by doing policy in this way. Here's a bunch of money. My influence is unacknowledged, and I don't need to make my influence all that acknowledged. There are going to be things that you agree with me on. There are going to be things that you disagree with me on. But you're going to agree with me on more stuff than not. But that's only so far you can push that. That's kind of my point when I say a man has to know his limitations. If you're going to pull money in this way and you're going to be so overt and repugnant about it, the country is going to balk. The country is not going to fall in line. Countries are not weak like this. Countries cannot appear to be weak in this way. Like it's you're punished for weakness. Let me say it that way. Yeah, you're punished for weakness. Let's keep going. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The numbers look weird. All right. We're hoping that Pakistan will see this as an incentive, not a punishment, State Department told reports. Think about that. Look, we're giving you $2 billion. If you don't do what we tell you to do and fall in goddamn line, we're going to take that money away from you. And we hope you look at this as an incentive. It's an incentive. It's not a punishment. We're not punishing you. This is just trying to incentivize you. Yeah. No country is going to fall in line to that, by the way. None. The politics doesn't allow countries to fall in line to something like that. Your leader must appear strong at all times because he needs to look as if he's representing, or she is representing the will of the public itself, meaning somebody who's strong enough to stand up and stand for the interests of another country, regardless of what that particular person wants. If another country is applying pressure to that person and another country is threatening that person, they're not going to allow themselves to look weak and acquiesce to the threats from another country. It is politically toxic to do so. It won't happen. The very act of threatening them in this way will get a rebuff, meaning the person is going to do the opposite of what Donald Trump is trying to force those people to do. The politics is just stupid. Politics are just ridiculous. According to the Wall Street Journal, this recent animosity towards Pakistan has not gone over well. No shit. Pakistani Foreign Minister Kawali Muhammad Asif said in an interview that the United States has failed to behave as an ally, and as a result, Pakistan no longer views it as one. If anything, Washington's recent behavior has only pushed Pakistan into the open arms of America's traditional rivals, China and Iran. China has been providing financial and economic assistance of its own to Pakistan, with plans to expand the economic partnership in years to come. What China should do is whatever the United States takes away, China should add it in, essentially buying the support. Now, this gets across the foolishness of what the United States has done. You had an ally in Pakistan. You didn't care about Saudi Arabia and the murdering of Yemenis and the behavior of Saudi Arabia and the repressive government of Saudi Arabia. You didn't care about the open-air ghetto and the torturing of children in Israel. But all of a sudden, Pakistan and Iran, oh, those are big deals. Those are big deals. Between the two of those, Pakistan was an ally. Pakistan was an ally. There is no situation where you're going to get everything that you want from every country that you're interacting with. The issue becomes, more often than not, the money is buying you influence. The money is not buying them, if that makes sense. There's a difference in those things. You're not going to get everything that you want in your interactions with those countries. The money thing was a good idea in the sense, as long as you don't necessarily openly state through your behavior that this is a bribe. We're trying to bribe you into behaving. That's amazing. China has already pledged to invest $57 billion in Pakistani infrastructure as part of the so-called Belt and Road Initiative. Just last month, Pakistan announced it was considering a proposal to replace the United States dollar with the Chinese yuan for bilateral trade between Pakistan and China. The United States dollar is the world's reserve currency. You've pushed other countries so much that they've gotten to the point where they're trying to undermine the fact that the United States dollar is the world currency and go around it. They're doing this because of the behavior of the United States. It's been so overt and gross that they've tried to find ways to subvert the authority or the control that the United States has from an economic standpoint, based on being the world's reserve currency. Following the Trump administration's recent attack on Pakistan, Pakistan confirmed that dropping the dollar was no arbitrary threat and immediately replaced the dollar with the Chinese yuan. Chinese investment in Pakistan is expected to reach over $46 billion in 2030 with the creation of a China-Pakistan economic corridor connecting Balochistan, Gwadar Port, and Arabian Sea with Kashgar in the western China. Harrison Akins, a researcher at the Howard Baker Center who focuses on Pakistan and China, told Newsweek. In the middle of last year, it was reported that China was considering starting its own naval bases in Pakistan. These reports began to immediately resurface again in the past week, though Pakistan has vehemently denied any such naval base will be built, even though Chinese military officials were the ones who exposed the plan to build a naval base in Guadalajara port. Whether or not the reports are true, what has become apparent is that Pakistan will look to cooperate with China, both economically and militarily, while giving up its reliance on Washington. Further, according to the Times of Islamabad, Iranian and Pakistani defense ministers have held talks on Washington's role in the region and have indicated a growing defense cooperation strategy between Tehran and Islamabad. Even before Donald Trump's decision to unilaterally try to isolate the two countries, the expanding relationship was already well underway. Most likely, the more truthful reason the Trump administration has targeted them both. Much to Washington's dismay, this is only the beginning of the end of America's role as the unchallenged global superpower. The Asian Times report that Iran, China, and Pakistan are all set to launch a trilateral nexus that would support economic development for as many as 3 billion people. The biggest obstacle to implementing such an economically viable nexus would actually lie in the growing economic power of India, not the United States, which seems to be able to do little but taunt, threaten, and bully the ever-growing list of defiant states. There's more. Without hesitation, Turkey, another country that is forging stronger ties with Russia, China, and Iran, also came to the Iran and Pakistan set aid. Turkey is a NATO ally. We cannot accept that some countries, foremost the United States, Israel, to interfere with the internal affairs of Iran and Pakistan, Turkish President Erdogan reported before heading on a scheduled trip to France. Turkey and Iran also famously came to the aid of Qatar last year, further complicating the restructuring of the traditional Washington-led alliances. At this stage, Turkey and Iran could end up joining the Chinese and Russian-led military alliance known as the Shanghai Bloc, with Iran recently strengthening its military ties with China. Given China has both economic and military interests worth protecting in Pakistan, the Eastern Alliance is spreading ever further by the day to the detriment of Washington. It is no wonder that the European Union is practically building its own army, given the number of countries that feel safe to rely on the United States' so-called global leadership under Donald Trump and growing smaller by the day. And given the serious implications of Pakistan's shift to China's sphere of influence, it's curious the story isn't making headlines. That story should make headlines. You're talking about an alliance between major countries, some of which are nuclear-powered nations. And if Pakistan gets to the point of putting a Chinese military base, naval base, that would be amazing. That is fucking amazing. And I don't believe Pakistan saying, no, we never said that. We never said that. If they're investing $67 billion into your country, you're putting a naval base in that country. The reason why I say that is part of the reason that Washington gives money around the world in the way Washington do. People always like to cut foreign aid. Now, foreign aid is for influence. Foreign aid is for influence. We try to create client states in the way that we behave in our operations. Donald Trump is just so bad at politics that he made this explicit, if that makes sense. You're being overt with it. You can't overt say that you're bribing somebody. It looks bad. The country is like, what? You're responding to this guy saying he's going to take money from you? Countries, whether the United States acknowledges it or not, have pride in themselves. The way that the United States talk about freedom and justice and all this other stuff, those countries have their own traditions and cultures that they themselves take pride in. It's not just a specific American thing. All countries have their mythologies and their talking points about how awesome their beginnings were. Well, there's nothing special about that. Those countries are people too. When I was in Egypt, and I was talking to one of the guys, the baggage handlers. He didn't speak English very well, but I understood what he was saying. He said Bush, he was comparing to some kind of macho wrestler. It was an insult, but he was making this point that Bush hates Arabs. He got that part across. Barely understanding other stuff. Bush hates Arabs. And I tried to explain to him that it's not that Bush hates you. He just doesn't care. There's a difference in those things. He's apathetic towards you. You may even say that the apathy is worse. He's killed 1 million of you because he just did not care. He doesn't necessarily see you guys as people in the same way that he may see another American or something like that as people. That is a shocking and horrific thing to have to tell somebody, but it's absolutely true. You don't go into a country and kill 1 million people if you actually cared about the people in that particular country. These are real countries. These are real people. The bombings and the killings and all this other stuff, these are real people. These are real countries. And these countries are now cobbling themselves together because the United States has tried to overexert the authority that it possesses using military and economic power. And they're trying to get under that economic and military power, get from under that. Egypt or Europe has been talking about an army, or at least I've heard conversations about a European army. Slightly fucking terrifying. The European Union wasn't supposed to be a military organization, but fair enough. I'm just making this point that the reason they're doing these things is because of what we did, the way we've behaved as a unipolar power. This is not a game where you just win. You could just dominate the rest of the globe. So, I love this article, and this guy's right. They don't talk about this on the mainstream media, and they should talk about this on the mainstream media. They don't talk about this on the mainstream media for one specific reason. Media, when it's given a story, is takes a perspective with the United States. I mean, in the United States, whatever the United States does is doing it for the right reasons. It's like it's not skeptical of the motivations of the United States. Let me say it that way. So having an article like this where you're showing that the United States is fucking up in regards to foreign policy wouldn't necessarily follow a mainstream media. So this should be here. That should be on mainstream media. And unfortunately, it is not. So anti-media, good fucking story. What's the guy's name? Darius Shahamabisi. I'm sorry if I fucked that up. I'm sorry if I fucked that up. Yeah. Let's see. We have people here for the second one. All right. Stay out of Iran. Charles Ponzi, yes. Straightforward to the point. Stay out of Iran. Agreed. Garnone, is this book related to Chomsky's Rose State in any way? It also has a similar cover than Chomsky's Deterring Democracy. Is the author a published ripping off Chomsky? Hey, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know who William Plum is. I didn't put this. No, guard. I didn't put this picture up here for I didn't put this picture up here with the book. That's not the book. This is an article from Anti-Media. It's not an article from Anti-Media. I don't like what Jamal is saying. I'm reporting him as suicidal. Zox Avux. What the hell? Let's see. The United States knew where Osama bin Laden was all along. It's quite possible that bin Laden was already dead and they shot someone else. They dumped the body in the fucking in the ocean. Absurd. Yeah, the ocean thing is weird to me. That's weird. Not just weird. Slightly cowardly. Slightly cowardly. If you're going to accuse somebody of a terrorist action, somebody, you know, you're as the United States, you said that's the guy that did it. Fine. Bring his ass to a court of law in New York and let him stand trial in the shadow of the buildings that he crumbled. If you can prove your case. It's like you can't take the government's word for it just because the government accuses somebody of something. I don't give a shit what it is. If you're going to say that this guy did it and you're going to put your hands on this guy, then you need to drag his ass back and put him on trial. How are you going somewhere just shooting somebody in the face? It's fucking amazing. I mean, is that what we've become? Just a nation that just goes out and outright murders whenever we just make the determination that we ourselves want to murder? Yeah, if we're a nation of laws, grab his ass and bring his ass back for trial. Rob O'Neill's part of the celebrity sniper Navy can't get out. Rob O'Neill is part of the celebrity sniper Navy SEAL conservative famous shooter club. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that was a thing. Charles Ponzi, EU nations have lost their sovereignty. Yeah, they have. I mean, if look, not fully, but yes, kind of. If they want to remain in the European Union, yes, they've lost their sovereignty. They don't even have control of their money at this point. I have to be honest. UK, not for racist reasons, but understand why they got up. Understand why they got out. It's funny. Hitler did his best to militarily conquer Europe. And Germany was able to do it economically. and getting everybody to fall in line. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah. Charles Ponzi. Nothing would change until we end the Federal Reserve and get rid of all central banks. Charles Ponzi, I agree with you with this, with the Federal Reserve thing. That's a little weird to me. I don't understand why we would allow debt on our money in this way. It's like the federal government has... Look, it's the job of the United States government to create money. It creates money out of thin air. Putting debt on everything that the federal government does in this way is fucking insane. It's just weird. Yeah, I agree. Until they actually move to the wine, we must view the latest media blitz about Pakistan as doubtful. They can talk about it all they want. It means nothing until they do it. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough, Gardo. Fair enough. It's like they're just popping off until they actually do it. Captain Obvious. And why exactly are we entangling these alliances? And why exactly are we in these entangling alliances? What do you mean with these other countries? Well, each one gives us something we need. The United States went into alliance with Saudi Arabia back in like the 40s or something. FDR, they're offering support and protection for oil. As for Israel, well, they're our attack dog in the Middle East. Israel helps enact United States policy, meaning there's certain things we can't necessarily get our hands dirty with. Israel gets our hands dirty for that particular policy. And for that, they're somewhat of a client state. Now, we're interacting with them because we have certain reasons or interests in the region that both of these things supply. It's nothing to do with humanitarian reasons. Nothing to do with what's good. It's nothing to do with integrity. It's everything to do with certain objectives that they want to accomplish, and they can use these guys to accomplish those objectives. And don't get me wrong, it goes both ways. I mean, we offer cash, support, weapons to both of these countries. So, yeah, these are entanglements with rogue nations, with two other rogue nations. Coyote Bongwater. The EU could be so much more. I weep for the potential. How much longer will humanity live under fraction nation states? Yeah, agreed. I think the European Union ended up that way because they wanted to prevent another war. They had two major fucking wars. Like, yeah, they had two major wars. So I don't think it's crazy for them to say, okay, we need to not do this again. I mean, we had what, 12, 15 million people died in the first war, like 50 something million people died in the second one. We need to not do this again. That being said, do you need to create an organization in the way that they've created for the European Union? And of course, that's somewhat doubtful. That's somewhat doubtful. And I would even argue somewhat problematic. Though the European nations are not states. It's almost like they're being treated as states. They're not states, they're countries. The United States are states. There's a difference in those things. Like, even from a legal standpoint, there's a difference in those things. The federal government has certain powers that the European Union does not possess. Meaning when they have financial stress and everything else. And take out the legal thing for the moment. The way that people see themselves. Meaning, if something happens in Texas, say there was a flood, say something happened, I don't particularly like Texas. Despite me not particularly liking Texas, if anything happens in Texas, my first thought is, hey, we need to help Texas. I say we. I look at us as a nation. Yes, it is somewhat of a fictional line, you know, drawn around the map and say this is the United States. But how we see each other, I think, is somewhat fundamentally different than the way those countries see each other. I think those countries see each other as countries. The United States see ourselves as one. I just think there's a difference. I mean, but I just think there's a difference. I don't live in Europe, so I can't necessarily say it. But yeah, I think there's a difference. Let's see. Too many dual citizens in high places. Cheeky rogue. No, not anymore. They're now states like sex is not gender. Dig? They changed the word and somehow achieved their end. Oh, right. The Orwellian word change. It's like, look, this is not a punishment. This is just an incentive. The same fucking thing. It's not really rogueness. It's kind of the whole point of American exceptionalism, right? Lead the world or else. Yeah, but by definition, that someone makes you a rogue nation. If you're going to take the standpoint that we're the leaders and everybody else is sniveling bitches that can go to fuck themselves, well, you can understand that the other nations have a certain amount of pride in themselves, and they're not necessarily going to take that line down. They're going to do what they need to do to self-actualize themselves. And what you're going to end up doing is essentially create factions and rivals against you. I said it before, and I think it's absolutely perfectly true. Anything that is working out of balance and out of a certain amount of equilibrium creates the seeds of its own destruction. The United States has been acting as if we are a singular power and that everybody else is subordinate to us. That's not true. There is no game to just absolutely win by domination. You're going to have other factions in other nations. You can win it through cooperation, meaning these nations kind of join together in this kind of kumbaya, emancipatory moment where everybody is singing in the sun. But you can't do it through domination. You're always going to have friction and chaos. There's always going to be wars that would need to be fought. And you're going to have stuff like this where people are creating alliances in order to stand against what they consider to be your overstepping your bounds. So, yeah. But Nevada, there really aren't any news organizations that are not co-opted and corrupted outside the independent journalism and radical politics. Yeah, I have a hard time finding it, man. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think you need those outlets because you need to see. The problem with that is it's almost like you need to see the bias in it, if that makes sense. Like you need to see the bullshit in it. And you need to have it where you can look at multiple sources in order to kind of compare and contrast what's being said versus what not being said. But yeah, there's no such thing as like a singular source that gives you this kind of great perspective in this. Anth Martin. Yeah, I guess it's just public opinion in the United States not agreeing with the American exceptionalism, which I don't agree with either. I would just say it's not rogueness to the standards of United States policy. Yeah, but the rogue thing, what I mean by rogue nation is that we've been isolated. You have Europe, who for the most part condemned the United States move of the thing to Jerusalem, literally standing in solidarity. I thought Europeans were somewhat pussies in the way that they interact with the United States, but in this one, they stood together on this. Then you have these other nations, Russia, Pakistan, China, Iran. Now, all of this, because the United States has been antagonizing all of these nations. All of these nations, it makes perfect sense that they will work together. Many of these are nuclear power nations. Imagine the situation where a defense pact is developed with these nations. You would have all these nations defended with the nuclear power nations, meaning any attack on one is somewhat of an attack on all, and that would be immensely problematic. If Israel, the United States, if any of those states attacked any of those other states, what would be the response from these nations? And is this one of those things that topples us into a nuclear war? We've been acting like we're the only power in this world and that everybody else is just subordinate, and that is not the case. That is immensely not the case. Andrew Input. News is getting worse, though. It was 30 corporations in the 80s, and now it's down to 6 media corporations. Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but yeah, the telecommunications thing, when Bill Clinton came in and essentially destroyed this idea of telecommunications. Not to mention, it seemed they've completely stopped fighting antitrust violations. I mean, the idea that you have like 6 or 7 media companies, that's like a monopoly at this point. The EU and the United States could be playing good cop, bad cop when it comes to Palestine. Garno, that's true. That's true. But I slightly don't think so. And the reason I don't think so, they've always had the same perspective on this. They've always had the same perspective. The United States always goes into this thing of spoiling their ability to condemn Israel. I take them as being genuine on this. I could be wrong. But at the very least, I can only take them by their vote. I can't read their minds. Whether they're pretending good cop or bad cop, they've always taken a very particular tact with in regards to Israel and Palestine. I don't want to read their minds and say, well, they're taking this tact, but they don't really believe this. You could be right. You could be right. I'm just saying I don't know. And I take them for what they're doing, their actions, not necessarily what they're thinking. Cali to Bong order. Not just Reagan, but our schools. History textbooks were rife with propaganda that primed us with eating the exceptional bullshit. Yeah, that's true. That's true. The United States won World War II by ourselves. We raided the beach, and that was the end of World War II. Hitler just folded and shit himself and died. Not quite. Not quite. I would say Stalingrad was the thing that broke the back of the Soviet Union in World War II. There was a war even before that, a battle even before that was just as bloody. It was at that point where the German war machine started to roll itself back. Yeah, we're rife with propaganda. I mean, asking the question of whether we need to fight the Revolutionary War, whether there were other ways of... all I'm saying is it's rife with propaganda. The Gulf of Tonkin is another one. The one where the Spanish-American War, the newspapers essentially creating yellow journalism in order to come up with the idea for the Spanish-American War. The blacks and the hippies in order to lock up stoners. I mean, yeah, we're rife with propaganda. Hell, even how we view the Soviet Union and Russia. It's pretty amazing, and it's pretty fucking hypocritical. The United States was founded on a genocide. Literally, a genocide. Wiping out the population of this country, of this nation. Going from sea to signing sea, saying, hey, it is God's will for us to murder these other human beings and steal this land. And then after that, in order to, I guess, up the ante, slavery. Hey, we're not just murdering the citizens that are here now. Now that we've murdered these citizens on this blood-soaked land, we're going to also have slaves. And we're going to subordinate other human beings, and we're going to convince them that they are lesser than us, and we're going to enshrine laws in order to say that these lesser human beings, these 3/5 of people, don't have rights. They're owned to other human beings, and we can treat them pretty much any way we want. Not we, but people think that that's a fucking awesome history. Like, it's amazing to me when they're celebrating American history and they're celebrating American exceptionalism. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? What's exceptional about that? That's ghastly. Now, you look at the exact same situation in the Soviet Union in the October Revolution, where you had this revolution where these people essentially toppled the I can't think of his name. It was like a king or something, or essentially the king that was in office at that time. And then you have Lenin coming into the Soviet Union and taking over that particular revolution. It's like two revolutions. The government that was put in office didn't necessarily want to continue with what they wanted with all the reforms, in which case you had a second revolution that where Lenin got himself involved. I guess I make this point that all of the problems and the foibles that took place in regards to the Soviet Union becoming what they were, the United States looked at that and wags his finger and says, oh my God, those people were horrible, those people were bloodthirsty, etc., etc., etc. I grant you, Stalin was a fucking maniac. Stalin has millions of people murdered. So, fair enough. But I'm talking about the system itself, the origins and the creation of the system itself, not when Stalin took over that process. I'm talking about the system that they were trying to implement. We look at that. Or at the very least, history looks at that from the standpoint of the United States with a certain amount of scorn. And it is amazing that you can look at that with a certain amount of scorn while at the same time looking at the massacre and the genocide of one race and the subjugation of another with a certain amount of pride. It's fucking amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. Kevin, I was referring to the electrical courses, like they expect you to be working on this and not just mention or relegate it to dumb down pages on the alternate energies. Daryl, I agree. I heard also that Roosevelt was killed by the deep state. I don't know if Roosevelt was killed. Roosevelt was in bad health. I mean, come on. Come on. Glasnost. Yeah, we need our own Glasnost. We need our own Glasnost. Gorbachev was not amazing. I'm sorry. I would say you talk to Russians about Gorbachev and see if they think that Gorbachev was amazing. Andrew input. Yeah, I would say you talk to Russians to see what they think. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of Russians dying and them converting their system over into a capitalistic system. You're talking about people in the Clinton administration raping that country blind, taking millions of dollars. Some of those people were convicted from essentially stealing from the Soviet, well, at that point it was turning into Russia when they were coming apart. The United States made deals with the Soviet Union, that they wouldn't take advantage of the fact that they're coming apart, and that they wouldn't expand NATO any further than what it was. We lied. And the same way we went back on our deal with Pakistan, we also went back on that deal with the Soviet Union, in which case we expanded the borders of NATO to surround Russia. Expanded the borders of NATO around Russia, completely lied. Not to mention stealing millions and thousands or hundreds of thousands of people died in that country. It's amazing what we allowed. It's absolutely amazing. It was the Russians' fault putting their borders near our missiles. Those bastards. Those commie bastards. How dare they put their borders near our war machines. Chase Scott, Jamal is now making up dog appointments just so he can stay home and make videos. His addiction to YouTube videos is getting out of control. No, we have so I bought my wife a trip for her birthday. Well, two things. It's not her birthday. For Christmas and for doing amazing. She just passed one of her tests or certifications for something she wanted to do. I bought her a trip to Oslo and Madrid. And the dog sitters and the people who are going to come to sit for the dogs require them to have their rabies shots up to date. So Bo was due for his this month, so we got him. So essentially Bo is now, what's the word I'm looking for? Heartworm and rabies free, or the very, well, he was always rabies free, but at the very least he's approved now for the person to sit with him. So anyone paying attention to Mexico's election, the Sanders candidate is winning and the CIA cries evidence of Russian hacking. I saw that. I did see that. Darren Aveli, I did see that. Yes, I did see that. They're screaming Russia. It's like Russia is getting involved. The funny part is they've screamed Russia for all of these elections. France, Germany, the United States. None of them have shown Russian involvement. None. Zero. They're making this shit up as they go along. They're making it up. Alright guys, I have where is it? Yeah, so I have one more I think that I want to do. So I am going to end this one. Look, I just want to say this. We have the option of working with other nations around the globe or not. There are allies that we ourselves depend on, and there is no such thing as the United States being able to do whatever it wants. There's no such thing as anybody being able to get away with doing whatever it wants. So this idea of just being a unipolar power and we tell everybody what to do and all this other stuff, that should have been a non-starter in understanding that that wasn't going to fly early on. What you could have gotten away with was wielding influence in all of these countries, understanding that there would be internal things to which they would rebuff you on. When Obama wanted to bomb Syria and David Cameron brings it up for a vote and shoots it down saying, yeah, we're not in this. Our parliament, his own party, voted against him on that measure, in which case David Cameron says, yes, we're out. Obama eventually acquiesced himself, saying, okay, we're going to work with Russia in order to have the nuclear deal, blah, 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 blah. All I'm saying is, well, work with Russia in order to give her the Syrian weapons and stuff like that. You can wield influence, but you can't wield influence to the point of to the detriment of the leaders in that particular country. That would not be allowed from an internal standpoint. And if you're going to try to wield power in a way with this kind of vulgar, I'm going to wave money in your face and I'm going to show that we're just going to take money away from you as if you're this bought dog that we can have on a leash with cash, that's not going to fly. That's not going to fly at all. And to make that point that it's not going to fly, these countries are forming their own blocks. You're going to continuously pushing these guys to form their own blocks, in which case you're going to become more and more isolated. That's all I'm saying. And by the way, this leads to catastrophic ends. If there's a conflict with one, there's going to be a conflict with World War I started with one of the guys getting shot. I can't think of his name. Duke Ferdinand. Can't think of his name. Essentially getting shot in Serbia. After getting shot in Serbia, one calamitous moment after the next ends up pulling all of these countries into a war based on the alliances that these countries had formed. Now, this is ridiculousness. Meaning, I have a pact with this guy that if I get in trouble, this other guy is going to get involved in this particular conflict, who has a pact with somebody else, who if somebody else gets in trouble, that guy is going to get involved in this conflict. Britain comes in and says, if you fuck with Poland, we're going to get involved in this conflict, in which Britain gets involved with this conflict. You had the entire arena of Europe into a war based on the alliances that those countries had created. We're creating these blocks again. The Trans-Pacific Partnership was trying to essentially leverage out China and Russia. It was literally pulling together, I think, like 40% of the globe, of trade around the globe. Again, creating these blocks, creating these trade blocks. If they're isolating these countries, and if these countries cling together in this way, if you have Europe creating its own military because it believes that the United States can't be trusted, if you have these other countries essentially chastising the behavior of the United States with regards to the UN, meaning being isolated even in the UN, this creates problems around the globe, and your influence, this belief that you're a unipolar power, is slowly dwindling away. Your chief power at this point, your export, is military force, essentially the bully in the schoolyard. These other countries will not acquiesce to the behavior of the United States, particularly when it's vulgar and overt. So, look, personally, I think this is problematic. I think this can cause larger conflicts, but stay tuned. We will see. The United States is not a unipolar power, regardless of what the United States thinks. And ultimately, these other countries are forming blocks in order to contest that particular power, including trying to subvert the United States dollar. Gardner, I agree with you that until they do it, you know, it's just a threat. But if they're making that threat, at some point, they may pull the trigger on that, particularly if their association becomes more close with China than it does the United States. And if they put a military base in China, in Pakistan, which kind of makes a point. I mean, it makes sense. If China is invested in this kind of businesses and everything else, they're going to protect their investment. I would imagine they would insist on having some kind of military armament in that particular part of the globe in order to protect what they consider to be their assets. So I don't necessarily think that's shocking. Pakistan, on the other hand, however, may take have feelings about allowing another military force to be in their country in the same way that the United States was a military force in their country. Ideally, China is not going to be murdering its citizens in the way that the United States was. But that is a sea change. That is a shuffle in regards to the alliances that have been in this world, in this particular world order. And that shuffling, in large part, is coming from our particular behavior around the globe. Donald Trump may be the worst case of it, but come on, let's be honest. This behavior was there under Bush, and this behavior was there under Obama. Obama put a better face on it, but the behavior was still there. So I'm going to leave it at that. Guys, I appreciate you guys showing up. This is kind of a lunchtime one. Actually, it's 4 o'clock. It's almost 5 o'clock. Yeah, it's almost 5 o'clock. All right, so I have one more that I want to do. And that one is probably going to be much faster than this one. So, all right, guys. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, and subscribe. And, of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, guys. And, by the way, it's funny, my wife prods me to be like, hey, make sure you tell people thank you for this. Again, I want to thank everyone for the super cash, and I want to thank everyone for their Patreon support. I am trying to hit a number on Patreon, and I am paying more attention to making content specific to Patreon, if that makes sense, and trying to find things that are specific to people who are, I guess, who donate. I appreciate it. Not just appreciate it, to some degree I'm almost shocked by it. I fucking enjoy doing this, but it does take a lot of time. And yeah, I just say, look, I always feel weird about it because it feels like a digital tip cup, or like you're like a stripper or something like that, and people are putting money in your G-string. So it feels kind of weird and feels kind of odd. But I do appreciate it. I don't bring it up a ton. I hear people like bring it up in the beginning and the end of their videos, and other people make little short segments with it, like begging for cash, and it always feels weird. I don't bring it up much, but I do want to say I appreciate it. So, thank you for your support, and thank you for helping support this content. So, alright guys, you guys have a good day.